Can't do it.
Okay.
We'll do it live.
Okay. No.
We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
Thank you, Bill. We welcome you in. It's another edition of the Daily Puck Drop. It's Tuesday. We are in October. The Daily Puck Drop. We are live from the PuckSports studios built by our good friends at Limback Lumber. And they're here to tell you, everyone, contractors, do-it-yourselfers, they got you covered. They offer free deliveries for everything from whole house packages to homeowner DIY projects. They've got the largest stock moldings in the Northwest. They've got old school service because they've been doing it since 1930, folks. Give them a call at Limback Lumber, 206-782-3487. Visit them online at limbacklumber.com. That QR code, you can click there at limbacklumber.com. Thank you for watching on YouTube, on X. If you're on YouTube, the chat is open. Chat away. We try to respond to as many people as we possibly can. If you're listening on the PuckSports mobile app, and if you don't have it, iPhone users, download it today from the app stores. Android users, Google Play Store, it's going to have it shortly. Trust me, just a little bit of a process, and we'll get it up and running for you. Should be 10 days or so, maybe a little bit less, but Android users, it will be available there shortly. But again, the PuckSports mobile app is up and ready for you. Why download it? Well, because you can listen to this live. That's why. In your car, on the move, on the go. All right, we got a lot to cover today on the show in a few minutes. They're already in the waiting room. They're going to be with you momentarily. We didn't have them on yesterday, the HawksNest with Curtis Crabtree and Tim Booth. Why? Because, well, it was Monday Night Football. We don't need a preview. We want a recap. So we'll talk to those guys coming up here in a couple of minutes, get a recap of the game yesterday, their Monday Night Football, which was a massively, wildly entertaining game. It just so much to cover from that football game last night. So we'll get Curtis and Tim on here in just a quick second. We got John Canzano coming up around 10:40 today on the program. Of course, the breaking news, if you don't know already, Gonzaga has announced they are leaving the WCC. They are joining the Pac-12. So everybody was hand-wringing and upset, and the Pac-12 was being mocked last week by Dan Wetzel and Pat Forty and who's the big gulp guy at USA Today? Dan Wolken. Everyone's writing the same story. Pac-12's a joke, yada, yada, yada. Well, they just added the best basketball brand on the West Coast. And now are building themselves a hell of a basketball conference. Yes, do they need one more football? Yeah. I'd make an argument whoever they add for football will not be as important as what they just did today in adding Gonzaga. And you know who's not far behind? St. Mary's. St. Mary's ain't far behind. They'll be joining this conference pretty soon, guaranteed, just guaranteed. And what does it mean for Memphis? What does it mean for UNLV? I don't think any of the stuff that they signed is binding. None of it is. So could those schools opt out and come back in? Yeah. And if you're UNLV, you're fools today. You're just absolutely, you look like fools what you did. For a school that is basketball rich, could have been now in one of these conferences, just, idiotic. So we'll wait and see what happens there. So we'll cover that today with John Canzano. Bill Krueger will join us. We will put a wrap on the Mariners season. We will address the John Stanton comments that were made public yesterday in the Seattle Times by Adam Jude and Ryan Divish. They had caught up with Stanton back in June where he had made the comment, and I just can't believe he uttered it. And I know why they don't put these guys out there, because of a comment like that. We'll get to that coming up later in the show, but basically just saying our philosophy is we don't want to spend on free agents, not because we can't afford it. It's just our strategy. So your strategy is not to sign good players. Okay. Hey, whatever works. But of course, a lot of today will take place. A lot of our show today will focus in on the Seahawks and what was, again, a massively entertaining football game. But, I mean, and I think it's fair to say, and we'll ask the boys this, that they failed their first test. And it's okay to say you failed your first test. But it doesn't mean the defense is a failure. Let's get to it. We'll do the HawksNest here with Curtis Crabtree And Tim Booth here coming up here momentarily. Curtis joins us. Curtis, how are you, sir? Tim Booth, how are you? How are you guys this morning on a Tuesday?
I'm good, Puck.
How about you?
Yeah, one of you can just talk. It doesn't, you don't have to sit there and wait for one another. Curtis, take the lead for God's sakes. HawksNest, HawksNest with Curtis Crabtree and Tim Booth, brought to you by Georgetown Brewery, locally owned and operated by two diehard Huskies, Manny and Roger. They've been pouring the best local craft beer for the past 23 years. Makers of Manny's Pale Ale, Bodie Zaffa, a host of your other favorite beers. Tap room is open from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. Give them a visit at georgetownbeer.com. Tim, let me start here first with you. A wildly entertaining game, even though the Seahawks came out on the losing end. But hell, to sit back and watch it was fun.
It's been a long time since I've watched a Monday night game and just enjoyed watching it as much as that one was between just kind of how Detroit played, how Seattle had to kind of abandon the run and just lean on Geno in the first half, the way the offense responded in the second half for Seattle for a big chunk of it before they had to kind of, just start chucking it there at the end. It was a wildly entertaining football game. The lateral pass, the Ken Walker suplex over the defender to stay. Just a fun football game to watch. Like, you compare that with the Miami Tennessee game, which was about as I watched the first quarter of that and thought it was the most boring, first quarter I could remember. It was a really just kind of enjoyable night to watch football.
Curtis, ultimately, they end up losing a very entertaining football game, 42-29. There were certainly some moments that they could have been right back in it. A play here, a play there certainly changes the outcome of the game. But their first real test against a real, top-notch offense, and, they came away and they failed their first test. Now, again, that doesn't mean the defense is a failure. I said that earlier, but and I know that they had guys out, but they gave up 42 points, and their quarterback on the other team didn't throw an incompletion.
Yeah, it's exactly how it went. And ultimately, you can't undersell the missing pieces that they had. They were missing half of their starting defense, basically. That was a real problem for them, to where you had Trevis Gibson and Drake Thomas and Kobe Bryant and these pieces you aren't expecting to be full-time contributors for you, playing a lot of snaps yesterday. But you would expect to see a incompletion at some point in the game, and so they definitely didn't play to a standard that they wanted to last night on that front whatsoever. But it was encouraging to see the offense kind of step up and perform. The offensive line probably had its best game of the season so far. Ken Walker comes off his injury and looks phenomenal last night. The passing game is certainly everything we kind of think it is through 4 weeks. And there's a lot to like about that game and a loss. At the end of the day, the biggest problem from it is the fact that if you have to end up meeting Detroit down the line, it might be like a playoff tie-breaking home field advantage type of situation. But that's not a loss in the big picture that's going to hurt you all that much. That was a good, well-fought football game that you were on the wrong side of. And as long as you can bounce back and get your defense back to the levels I think they think that they can be at, I think it's not going to be a game that sticks with you too badly throughout the year.
Yeah, Tim, I don't think it was as bad as maybe the numbers would have indicated. If we want to look at total yards and all that kind of stuff, Seattle outplayed them in a lot of those categories, other than just what the final score was. I came away thinking, I'm different than you guys. I'm more of a fan. You guys aren't fans of the team. You cover the team, but I came away thinking, I was encouraged by it, even though they lost. I was like, okay. It's not bad. I chalked this up already as a loss for them anyways. So it was like, I win it. That's my glass half empty outlook on life, Tim. Yeah. But I just figured that they would lose this game. And then it just, especially with Williams and Murphy being out. And then you just saw them being able to take advantage of those two guys not being in there. There was some massive holes open for Montgomery and Gibbs all night long.
I think the couple of concerns you come out with it defensively are the sort of the overall pass rush that you didn't have without Mafe and Chenna and the interior push that you were getting over the first couple of weeks with Murphy and Williams from the D tackle spot. I think that's a worry. I think that, as you point out, the gaps in the run game, especially in the first half for Detroit, on the interior were pretty significant. And I think, you saw highlighted how important Julian Love is to that secondary.
Sure.
When he didn't play in the second half. The Jamison Williams touchdown was just a bust where there was bad communication back there on passing him off, and it led to him being wide open on a crosser like that. Maybe that happens if Julian Love is in there, but maybe it doesn't, just because he's kind of the quarterback back there in organizing everything. So the concerns are kind of, maybe your depth isn't what depth is always a concern for every team, but to me the depth of some of the drop off that they have, if you don't have your front line guys in there, kind of stood out a little bit last night, at least defensively. But to your point, I think you walk away incredibly encouraged about this offense, and especially that second half when you finally got the run game going with both Walker and Charbonnet. And then I put it out last night on X or whatever. That might be the best game I've seen Geno Smith ever play. He seemed so, take away the last series at the goal line where they couldn't punch it in. He just seems so in control of all of the chaos that was happening around him. Yeah. There's constant pressure from Detroit's front, and he just seemed to handle it all and make the right plays, make the right throws for most of the night. It was really an impressive performance by him.
Yeah, I mean, Curtis, we're talking about 4 games into really his tenure with this offense.
Yeah, and I think you could say that about Geno Smith's second game against New England and the way he played and some of the throws he made in that game. And the fact you've had 2 of those types of games already this year in 4 weeks is a pretty encouraging sign. Like, he's played outstanding football. Like, he is absolutely played to a top 5, top 6 quarterback in the league level for the first month of the season. There's not really any way to dispute that with the way he plays. He's been terrific. And then when Ken Walker is able to add that little bit of extra, make you miss ability that Zach Charbonnet doesn't quite have. You saw that in a couple different instances last night in that game. Their offense can really crank up. I mean, the fact that Laviska Shenault's a number 5 receiver on this team, Jake Bobo's a number 4 because of the talent they have in front of them. Those guys are good football players in their own right too, and that receiving core is really strong. Completions to 10 different receivers last night for Geno Smith, moves the ball around. Really manages the pocket around him pretty well throughout the game on a consistent basis. There's a lot to like about Geno Smith in that offense. And I thought both offensive coordinators last night, I thought were really, really good. Ryan Grubb and Ben Johnson were doing everything, the right counter punches, everything. It was a really impressively offensive called game.
They were both right. That was the one thing, because I was just intrigued at, like, Ben Johnson versus Mike McDonald. That was a huge storyline this week. One, because in a weird alternate universe, Ben Johnson's the head coach of the Seahawks, and Mike McDonald is coaching Jaden Daniels in Washington. And so I was curious to see the chess match between those two guys. And McDonald, his hands were tied behind his back because he didn't have 2 of his best interior defensive linemen. But it felt like for Johnson, and then even for Grubb against Aaron Glenn, to your point, Curtis, it just felt like both those coordinators were always a step ahead of the defense all night long.
Yeah, and I mean, you saw that with Glenn, he likes to run as much man defense as he can, and even late in the game when Seattle was trying to come back, he was fine playing man defense, and they were able to just march right down the field on that all night, which is something you like to see. I mean, if you think your dudes are better than their dudes, you should be able to do that in some circumstances, and they really did that for most of the night, which is good to see. And then, yeah, you got to give some credit to Ben Johnson on the other side too, because while the individual pressure didn't come from the defensive guys, every time they even brought like their schemed pressure and stuff, trying to get some blitzes and stuff, they had the right answer for it, whether it was max protecting in the right way or hitting the right counter play against it, like the screen pass that they hit in that game. It was a really well executed offensive game for the Lions as well.
Hey, Tim, the turning point, it felt like the turning point of the football game was the penalty on Tyler Lockett. Did they ever get like a real explanation for that? I mean, it didn't look like a penalty in real time. Troy Aikman, I believe, said it wasn't a penalty. I think most people have agreed that should not have been called a penalty. And that's just a killer. They pick up the first down, and who knows how that game turns out.
Yeah. And I think the part of it that if you're in the shoes of the back judge or the side judge, whoever it was that made that call, if you're looking at it from that angle, you kind of see Tyler sort of lower his right shoulder as he's going into the defender. And that's him trying to us on the replay and the different camera angles they had. It looked like he was just trying to get his release, and obviously he's trying to run a pick on that play.
Well,
like
of course.
it's not a secret, but
Yeah.
but it from the other angles, it looks like he's trying to get his release. From that back angle, you see him lower his shoulder in that instance and make contact with the defender and knock him off and knock him into the other defender and keep them from being able to get out to where JSN was at. It kind of looks like he's throwing a little bit of a block. Now, again, I think it was a shaky penalty to begin with. With how much that happens in the league and how much route combinations are based around pick plays. And in that situation, that's a pretty harsh penalty to make. But if Tyler just comes off and he doesn't sort of lower that shoulder and he doesn't kind of give that impression, I don't think the flag is thrown there. But to me, it was kind of that little lower of the right shoulder that sort of drew the attention from the official that led to the flag being thrown. But again, it's a crap penalty in all honesty that they would actually call that in a fourth down situation like that.
Well, and Curtis, especially how they were calling the game all night long, it was just curious. I don't know. It just, I know they were calling, a lot of, holding and pass interference and penalties like that. It's curious on some of the calls they didn't have, but, I think in that situation, the official, right, Curtis, they know what's going on. That type of play happens all the time. That just did not seem egregious like some other pick plays are.
No, it didn't. But like Tim said, I can see how that call was made. I can, because when Tyler drops his shoulder and then the defender that is covering Lockett gets basically run backwards directly into the guy that's supposed to be covering Jackson Smith and Jigba, like it looks like a pick in some aspects of it. Now, it's certainly not the most egregious pick that I've ever seen in the world. Now, you've certainly seen plays like that not get called. But could I see how that play gets called? Yeah, I can. There was one of the replays last night that made me go, okay, I see it. I get it. Even if it didn't feel like it was the most egregious penalty. But there was other calls that crew made throughout the night that were a little bit concerning. They didn't lose this game because of the officials, but there was, a few calls that, pass interference, non-call in the end zone to DK Metcalf that would have given them the chance to get down to the 1 yard line. There was a pretty big one. And, a couple other calls that aren't coming to my top of my head right off the top here. We're a little bit curious as well.
So this wasn't like when the Huskies and Jed Fish lose? That it was because of penalties and the officials, or
I'm not commenting.
Just wondering.
I'm not.
Because if you take all those out, they're undefeated.
Jason, I'm not commenting on Jed Fish and officials and anything like that.
But and Curtis, to your point, you're right. They didn't lose because of the officials. They lost because they couldn't. The other quarterback did not throw an incompletion. They had no
receiver. And the one receiver who threw a pass completed that one too. So they were 19 of 19, allowing passes to be completed last night.
I forgot about that. You're exactly right. I totally forgot about that. But there were some miscues. It just was a poor night for the officiating.
Yes.
To not even to look at the 2-point conversion. And I want to get to the 2-point conversion in a second because I want people to yell and scream at me that I'm yelling at the clouds and I don't understand analytics. But the 2-point conversion, he that warrants a look.
When the play happened, I thought he just dropped it. I thought the ball had hit the ground and it was incomplete. And then you saw the replay and you're like, wait, is his knee down? And then for them not to just stop the play, because obviously there was the flag there, just stop it and look at it. And supposedly McDonald was told that the replay had looked at it and decided that it was incomplete. I don't know. It looks pretty damn complete to me on the replays. I think that's worthy of an explanation as to why they determined that play incomplete. And then I think the other one that really stands out as kind of, where was this crew at was the play in the end zone where DK got robbed essentially.
Got tackled.
And for them not to throw DPI on that play, it's like, okay, if you're going to call this sort of 50-50 call on Lockett for offensive pass interference, how do you not call sort of that when it's clearly a lot more egregious on a on a jump, so kind of a jump ball situation. So it was 100%. The officiating did not cost them the game. The way they played in the first half and not gain off the field defensively is what cost them this game. But there were some calls in there that you could definitely quibble with in the grand scheme of everything that happened.
I want to jump in, Curtis, to the 2-point call. I mean, I know I don't need the mathematics to be explained to me. I understand the logic, the analytic logic behind it. I do not understand why you do it. There's 3 minutes left in the third quarter. To me, it just makes zero sense to be chasing 2 points there when all you need is a touchdown to tie it.
Yeah, I mean, I get the analytic math too, and I think it is worthwhile to have a head coach that is willing to play that style and do that in certain circumstances, given the way that the points. If it would be one thing, I think, if you felt like the 14 points wasn't going anywhere, like it wasn't a track meet game where you feel like there could be another 6 touchdowns scored before the end of the game. I think the analytics and being open to doing that makes sense sometimes. It still would be tough if I was in those shoes to make that call to do that, I think, because it's just kick the extra point and it's a touchdown game. I totally get that sentiment too. But I mean, again, not going to go through the nitty-gritty of the numbers of it, but yeah, statistically teams make 2-point conversions a little more than 50% of the time. So if you do it over the long term, it's supposed to play out in your way, but you need to deal with the variance of the fact that every once in a while it's not going to go your way. So That's how it works.
Well, and then I would just say this, Tim. I just didn't like what they were in on the 2 attempts. I just don't like it. You get inside the 5. I don't. 2 things. 1, I don't like being out of the shotgun. I don't see the strategy in that. And then 2, I don't understand why Ken Walker's not in there.
Yeah. And I think that's what you can debate more than actually going for it. In terms of going for it, I would have, if it's early fourth quarter, I'm 100% behind the idea of going for 2 at that point. I think, late third, I think you can kind of go back and forth on it. But more to your point, especially after the penalty took it to the 1, I just thought it was a bad play call. I just thought it was the wrong call for that. For that situation. And yeah, you should have, like, how do you not have a set that has both those guys on the field? Why don't you have Charbonnet and Walker on the field and just, create that uncertainty with the defense about where the ball is going to go? I just didn't like the play call. I thought the call was, going for it was fine. Maybe would have liked it if it was more, early fourth quarter to do that, but I thought just the play call itself was poor.
Yeah, F you, Grubb. You're not perfect. All right, F you. You're not a perfect offensive coordinator.
Hey, I just want to know, in that situation, why aren't you running a wide receiver reverse after a fake handoff?
You could have done that, or a speed option.
Speed option to the boundary, yeah.
Speed option to the boundary would have been great in that situation.
Would have been great. I mean, that joke's never going to get old. Yeah, I just think if you're going to do it, I think we all agree, you just at least put Walker in there to at least have the defense think that he's going to get the ball, because they're going to be more afraid of Ken Walker than they are going to be of Zach Charbonnet, right, Curtis? I mean, he just poses a bigger threat to them.
Yeah, he's the more shifty kind of back that can kind of get skinny and find a way to sneak through a line where Charbonnet's not going to have that make you miss ability in quite the same way. So,
God, how good was he though, Curtis? Huh? Nice to have Ken Walker back.
Yeah, I mean that. In addition to the double somersault play, which is just an incredible feat of athleticism. Regardless of whether he was, stayed up and got a couple extra yards or not, that was just amazing to watch. That cutback run, where Carlton Davis had a rough night for the Lions. Sure. I mean, he got abused by DK Metcalf, and then he's the one out there on that island and just gets absolutely run around by Ken Walker on that touchdown run. He's got some really impressive ability, man, as a running back to be able to do stuff like that. And as we talked about a couple weeks ago with Charbonnet, there's just not that ability from his game and what he brings to the table. Walker's got that different energy, that different gear to be able to find a way to do that sort of play. So really coming off the oblique injury and everything, he was terrific last night.
Well, and with the issues you have with the offensive line, your line played better last night, I thought. Oh. But you still have issues. You still have problems, and with that, you need the guy who can make the defender miss, and that's what Walker brings. I mean, we saw it a bunch last night. There was a lot of those runs that probably should not have gone as far as they did that he had in that game. Especially, obviously the cutback one is the one that stands out the most for the touchdown. But there were several runs in that game where, negative play or a 1 yard gain that he gets, 4 or 5 out of, just because he can make that guy miss and make up for the fact that the line, still has its issues.
How much do we know what the breakdown was or just, it's so hard to evaluate offensive line play and all that, but I mean, do we have the breakdown Bradford and Haynes?
Yeah.
Did they look better with Christian Haynes in there opposed to Anthony Bradford?
I don't know. It's kind of, it feels like pick your poison right now, but Bradford played 54 snaps. Haynes played 36.
Okay.
So
that's the most they've ever done.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the most of a split they've ever done. They rotated a little bit more, or they rotated in week 2 against New England, but it was still pretty heavily Bradford that week. This is the closest it's been to a 50-50 split. I thought it was okay. Like, neither played great. Neither stood out as being, it didn't feel like Bradford was as much of a problem as he has been the last couple of weeks.
Wow.
But yeah, they were okay. I guess that's the best way to say it. They were just fine.
Seahawks. I want that on a t-shirt, Curtis. Seahawks offensive line. It's okay.
It's okay.
That's what we need from Simply Seattle. All right, Curtis, the Jason Peters. Okay, make sense of it. Jason Peters signed to the practice squad. What's that mean? How do you interpret that signing?
I think it can be a little bit of additional help at guard as well, because he's played that position in the past. He didn't do it here last year when he was here, but he has done that a little bit in Dallas. And with George Fant going on IR a week ago, I think it's just giving yourselves that little bit of extra deep depth just to give yourself somebody else in the building, just in case. I know McDonald used it a couple weeks ago, the break in case of emergency kind of piece with Peters coming in. So I think the way that Bradford and Haynes played this, yesterday gives them the ability to stick with those guys. But you're also going to have, 2 games in 5 days here coming up, where all of a sudden, if somebody gets nicked up here in the Giants game this weekend, one more injury happens, either at tackle or guard, you've got a guy who's ramping up to be able to help you out in that circumstance if you need it.
Yeah.
Well, and remember with Peters, when he got here last year, it took him like 3 weeks to get ready to actually contribute to something. So, and no disrespect to Jason Peters, he's had an incredible career, but he's almost my age, and so like, it's just stuff doesn't work quite the same anymore. So, so the fact that that's nice that he's going to be here, and that's additional depth. And yeah, I think actually he's probably more of an insurance policy for guard right now than he is tackle, because knock on wood, Storm Forsythe's actually played pretty well.
Sure. Well, Hutchinson didn't. I mean, you didn't hear Hutchinson's name called a lot last night.
No,
you haven't heard it much in 3 years of games that he's played against Seattle.
Yeah.
Honestly, he has not made much of a factor in any of these last 3 years.
And all week long, that was like a storyline. And I joked about it yesterday with Jim. I'm like, you know what? We just sit there and talk about this all the time, and watch him. He's not even going to have a good game. And he didn't. I think he had 3 quarterback hits. He didn't have a sack. He didn't do anything.
He
did have some pressures. He did have some pressures legitimately, but no sacks.
Yeah, it was a mostly, quiet game from him. So Forsythe's played, pretty well out there. It's great to have Jason Peters around in case you need him, because you have 2 games in 5 days coming up, but it's probably Atlanta or maybe Buffalo after that before you could actually count on him to actually contribute, just because he's old and he needs ramp up time to get ready.
We all need ramp up time. Don't worry about it. You'll experience it soon. Just wait till you get to ramp up time, because this is
why you have to show up 30 minutes early for pickup basketball, so that you can spend all your time stretching and running and all this stuff, to then go out and die playing basketball.
Yeah, I just 1 minute before and just say, you know what, it's going to hurt. So I just know it's going to hurt. All right. So, but after 4 games, Curtis, is this what you expected? Like heading into the season, or what did you think after 4 where they would be?
I figured this is within the realm of what I thought they would be. Yeah, I figured they would either be 2-2 or 3-1, depending on how quickly they got started, and given the circumstances that they actually did end up facing with the quarterbacks that they faced over the first 3 games of the season. Yeah, I figure this is basically where I'd expect them to be at this point, and I would expect them to be at 4-1 after this next Sunday, going into a key early season matchup with the 49ers. And then we'll get the chance to see what this division's kind of shaping up to be, because I think that's still going to be the battle by the end of the season, and what the two teams at the top of the division are going to be, and exactly what these teams are going to be. I think we're still on both fronts, both with Seattle and San Francisco. We don't know at this stage. We're getting a little bit closer to kind of understanding where they're at, but with Seattle, we know that their offense is pretty dang good. The defense, particularly the rush defense, if you want to include a little bit of the Patriots game, might have a little bit of concern to it. And I think it's too much to read too much into the passing game yesterday, just because of how many injuries there were, how real that that performance was for them. But in general, I think we've seen a lot of good things from this team over the first 4 weeks of the season.
Tim, same question to you.
I thought they were going to be, before the season, I thought 2-2 was going to be where they were at this point, because, I thought Miami was going to have Tua and you were going to lose that one and then probably lose to Detroit and face kind of this key stretch coming up with the Giants and the 49ers. It's still obviously a key stretch, but being 3-1 right now, I think is a little bit beyond what I thought they were going to be. The offense has been much better than I thought it was going to be. Like, I thought there was going to be a certain level of growing pains with the concerns about the offensive line and implementing a new system. But, this is a credit to Geno Smith and what he's done. Obviously there was a ton of skill talent on that side of the ball. There was the potential for this to be what it has been for the first few weeks. And I think it's a sign of the, that's the grasp and understanding of what Ryan Grubb's trying to do, that Geno and the offense has played to the level that it has. Like Curtis said, go ahead.
No, go finish your thought.
I was saying, like Curtis said, I think if there's a glaring concern on the defensive side, it's the run defense. Last night it showed up, particularly because of the absences, but it was also there when they played the Patriots. And so that would be my, worry moving forward. Maybe not so much against the Giants coming up, but then, you got Jordan Mason and San Francisco coming in 5 days later, and that'll be a true test for where the run defense is at.
It felt like, if you look at the numbers, right, Tim, you go, well, I mean, they gave up 116 yards on 28 carries, 4.1 yards a carry. You're like, well, that's not that bad. But that really felt like a game last night where if they really wanted to, if Ben Johnson really wanted to hammer down on the running game, that those numbers could have been much worse.
Well, in the first half, what was it? They were
88 yards on 16 carries.
Yeah, 5.5 yards a carry in the first half.
Yeah,
they were, and it felt like it was 4 to 5 yards downfield before there was any contact, and that was
Boise State, Washington State.
Ashton Genty for another 53 yards.
Yes, there he is again. Still can't tackle him. Yeah.
God, that was amazing. But it felt a little like last year. You know how last year it felt like it was every running back Seattle played was getting through the first line before, Bobby Wagner's trying to hold on for dear life and bring them down. It felt a little bit that way in the first half. To their credit, they were better in the second half in shutting down. But yes, if Ben Johnson with those two backs wanted to just run the ball, 50 times last night, then I think the numbers would have been pretty significant in terms of the rush game that the Lions had.
One thing that hasn't been answered, at least, and it's not just me. I think a lot of people had, question marks of what they were going to do in the interior of their defense, or in the middle of their defense at linebacker, the Dotson, the Baker, and then Knight. That hasn't been answered after 4 games. I mean, to me, it just still seems like there is a lot missing there.
I think Dotson's pretty good. I think he's actually played fairly well. Not having Jerome Baker, I felt like showed up last night.
Okay.
And that's Tyrese Knight being a rookie. When you're having to, no disrespect to Drake Thomas, but when you're having to rely on Drake Thomas in that situation, that's not good. So I think it's not so much how Dotson's played, because I think he's actually played fairly well, but I think it was more the absence of Baker. Jerome Baker kind of showed up last night.
Okay. Curtis, do you agree with that? Only reason I bring this up is because they had both those guys for the Patriots game.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with Tim. I think Dotson's pretty good player, but we talked about how good Ben Johnson was as a coordinator last night. Like, you're able to find those little edges on a rookie 4th round pick linebacker and Tyrese Knight a little bit. I think that's partly played into it. And yeah, Drake Thomas is a very small linebacker. He is an undersized, more speedy coverage kind of linebacker as well. And I think there's certain circumstances where he's not going to be. You can't have him on the field for big heavy run teams and that sort of thing as well, just because the matchup's not going to be great. So they do have their depth issues at that position overall as well. So and I mean, if you didn't have all the other injuries on the defensive line, you probably could have had a Patrick O'Connell called up from the practice squad to give them a little bit more depth at that position, but you had to go to the D line given the guys that they had missing up front. So with your practice squad elevations. So yeah, I think they were able to find a way to take advantage of those positions a little bit for sure.
What do you think, Tim? Mike McDonald learned from last night, just about his defense, just about himself as a head coach. No, they weren't going to go undefeated, and everyone knows that he was going to suffer a loss. But what do you think he took away from that?
I think he took away that his defense is still a work in progress, and that the depth still isn't quite there. That is probably going to be called upon throughout the rest of this season. The guys who are missing on the defensive front, the edge guys who were out, not having Baker at linebacker, losing Julian Love in the secondary. Like the front line, it's kind of been a thing with this team all along. Your starting 22, your front line guys on this team are really good. You could put them on, on paper, they would be on par with a lot of other teams across the league. It's that next level, and how do you fill in behind and make up for those gaps when you have injuries and you have guys missing? That's always the question that leads between teams, having success in a season and having struggles. So I think that might be the one thing that kind of maybe jumped out to him last night is we don't necessarily have plug and play guys here. Like Kayvon Wallace is a nice player, but you can't just step in for Julian Love. Or Kobe Bryant is a decent, special teams guy who can be used in certain packages. But he's not going to step in and play to that same level, same capability if something comes up and he's called upon in a game like that. So I think maybe that might be the one thing that stood out about his defense. I think he's got to be pretty pleased though that when a lot of shit was not going their way last night, this team didn't just kind of, turtle and take their lumps and walk away. That was not only was it an entertaining game, but there was a lot of fight that Seattle showed. I hate using that phrase and like, oh, every team shows fight in a game. It sounds like you're talking about a high school team, but it's true in this sense that was a game last night where they showed some resilience. And with a lot of stuff that didn't go their way, they were, one score down on the Detroit 39-yard line, and had just converted a fourth down potentially to go in and score a tying touchdown when you get a unfortunate offensive pass interference call. So there's a significant amount of resilience that I think stood out about this team, and that's something I think Mike McDonald needs to be really pleased about.
Curtis, I just think there's a ton to love and to like what happened in the game. I mean, I just think that yes, the defense did not play well despite those guys being out, but I think on the flip side of it, you go, they didn't put out their best team to face them defensively, right? They did not put out their best squad out there to face Ben Johnson. And who knows, maybe it goes the same way. And they just had a night. I mean, sometimes offenses, it's old baseball, right? You tip your cap, you move on. But I think to Tim's point, I just think there was a lot to unpack from that game last night that I think as a Seahawks fan and someone who watches it, you come away encouraged by what and how they looked last night.
Yeah, I mean, Jared Goff is far more capable of making a, injury-riddled defense pay than Skylar Thompson and Tim Boyle are. I mean, that's just a different level of play, and you saw that last night. But in general, I think there's a lot to like about this team through the first month of the season. I mean, if your only loss so far is to a team that a lot of people pick to be the NFC representative in the Super Bowl at the end of the year, and you played them well, played them strong while you were depleted on defense for 60 minutes and put up a pretty entertaining, tough fight. I don't think there's too much to get all that worked up about with that game yesterday and the way that they played. Do they have areas to clean up? Sure, absolutely. Getting Leonard Williams and Boye Mafe and guys like that back in the lineup. Chenna Nwosu's getting closer as well. It'd be nice to have those guys moving forward for sure.
Yeah.
But offensively, I thought it was a step. They've been playing mostly pretty well all season, but the offensive line play helped out a little bit. The running game was a little bit better.
Yeah.
And, there's enough there to like, for sure, from the performance last night.
Yeah, it just that offense has just got the ability, and I think I think we've talked about it before. To me, it was the most exciting part about this team this year. Was going to be, and even though you hired a defensive-minded coach, to me, with what you watched in the past 2 years with Ryan Grubb, and then also just to see you have a very capable quarterback in Geno Smith. We can sit there and debate franchise quarterback all we want, but you look at his playmakers that he has with Walker and those 3 wide receivers, and I think you just felt, oh, God, there's a lot to work with these guys, and watching Ryan Grubb each game come with something different. And not every play looks the same. That's what just stood out to me last night again. There didn't seem to be like they ran the same play twice. Whereas when I watched Shane Waldron, it was like it was like 3 plays they ran. And that was like
fans love him already.
Oh my God, they already want him out of town. I mean, the Bears already want him out of town.
Well,
that
was the hallmark of Grubb over at UW. Was
yep.
He used it was the same play. But it just looked totally different.
Yeah.
Motions, shifts, formations, whatever. It's same concept, same play, but we're just going to dress it up and put it in a different form that you've never seen before. And that I think is what's showing up already with the Seahawks, is that they're going to bunch guys in a 3 receiver set. They're going to motion them. They're going to think about how the run game was doing nothing for the first, handful of plays, and then you motion Ken Walker and bring him back behind Geno Smith and throw a pitch to him and have Zach Charbonnet as the lead blocker. Like it's the same pitch play that you probably have run a million times, but just with a totally different look, and you're giving your running back essentially a head start on the play. Like, it's little things like that, which I think are just show up over time to where it's not difficult for the players to understand the scheme, because what they're essentially doing is the same thing. But just the way you present it, the way you show it, is so different that it's confusing for the defense to try and figure out.
All right, that's HawksNest with Curtis Crabtree and Tim Booth. It's all brought to you by Georgetown Brewery. They've been making the greatest Northwest local craft beer for the past 23 years. Manny's, Rogers, Bodie's Alpha, Lucille, all of it. It's all good. And it's good. Here's the thing about Georgetown beer. It's good for you. It's been scientifically and medically cleared that it is good for you. The tap room is open from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., open to close, like old school college. 7 days a week. Visit them at georgetownbeer.com. You want to do it now, Tim, or do you want to save it for yourself? Can we break the news, or you want to announce it later? Because now as we're wrapping up, I just forgot that you've got breaking news. It's like, congratulations.
Do you want to announce it now? I'm fine announcing it now.
It's up to you. It's your news. It's not my news. It's your news.
It's October 1st. I was going to announce it today anyway. I'll put it out on social media later. But for the 7 people who are watching right now,
there's 8.
8. I'm sorry. 8 people that are watching right now. This is my last week working for the Associated Press.
Thank God.
Amazingly, after 20 years. Thank God, is that what you said?
Yes.
That's nice of you, jerk.
Okay, tell everyone where you going.
So I'm going to be working for the Seattle Times starting next week. I decided that instead of being Ryan Divish's competitor, I wanted to be his coworker. Maybe kind of, sort of.
Okay, so what role, starting with the Seattle Times, what is your role going to be?
Well, that little basketball team that everyone keeps talking about that you happen to be wearing a hat of?
There was a reason I wore the hat.
Oh, very, very good. Very good. That's going to be kind of the primary focus, that and helping on Kraken, Seattle Kraken stuff to start with. So
awesome.
Following the expansion stories that plays out over the next few years, and hockey, probably do some baseball, probably still help on the NFL a little bit. So a little still kind of doing the jack of all trades thing that I've been doing for forever, but with a little bit more of a singular focus or specific focus, and not having kind of everything on my plate like I've had for the last 14, 15 years.
Congratulations, man.
Thanks, dude.
That's good. Congratulations. That's just awesome. That's just so cool that you're going to be doing that role. I can't wait to see you cover the Sonics. That's going to be awesome. And it's just going to be, all of it's going to be sweet. It's just going to be sweet to see you in a new role. And it's also going to be great for you. So you don't have to work all the time.
You mean like this morning when I woke up to news of Gonzaga going to the Pac-12? Yeah. That'll be kind of nice.
Congratulations. Congratulations, Tim. We appreciate it for doing it. And you as well, Curtis. We'll talk to you guys next week. Appreciate it, boys.
See you, Puck.
There they are, Tim Booth and Curtis Crabtree. HawksNest, we do it every Monday, breaking down the Seahawks and their loss yesterday there to the Detroit Lions. All right, let's switch gears. Breaking news coming out of college football as Washington State, Oregon State, they find themselves with a brand new partner, ladies and gentlemen, from JohnCanzano.com. You can follow him on Twitter, John Canzano BFT. You can listen to the guy on his radio show, 750, down there in Portland, Oregon. Did I mention JohnCanzano.com? Yeah, you can read him there. Ladies and gentlemen, it's John Canzano, his weekly appearance, all brought to you by Zeke's Pizza. Visit Zeke'sPizza.com. Johnny Can, sorry that we're just a little bit late. Okay. But, man, you had it early this morning. And it's a done deal. The Zags are coming to the Pac-12. How'd this happen? How did it all work out that Gonzaga is joining the conference?
Well, I'm told that the two sides have been talking for some time, and we had seen some smoke out there about it, and but those discussions really ramped up over the weekend and into Monday. Gonzaga informed WCC Commissioner Stu Jackson. The president at Gonzaga called the commissioner of the WCC at 10 o'clock on Monday night and said, hey, we're leaving for the Pac-12 conference. I don't think it was a shocker to Stu Jackson. They had been sort of bracing for this. WCC did some expansion itself. But the Gonzaga addition to the Pac-12, I mean, Puck, come on, I don't have to tell you what it means. You're right here in the Pacific Northwest. You know that this is a tentpole basketball move, a blue-chip university, a real premium addition to the Pac-12. It sort of demonstrates how picky and selective the Pac-12 has been. It underscores the idea because, I think we wondered after they took that first bite of expansion by taking those 4 schools out of the Mountain West Conference, did they make a mistake in not grabbing UNLV and Utah State in that first bite? Did they make a mistake and misplay their hand with Memphis? This kind of shows you that, no, they got what they wanted in that first bite with the Mountain West. And then they went shopping in the American Athletic Conference, and maybe they didn't get the price that they wanted, the value that they wanted on Memphis and others. And so it shows them not just grabbing anybody, any place, any time to try to fill out the roster. It really does show how selective and picky they're being. And I think that's worth noting here. But clearly, major victory for a conference that has done so much wrong in the last 2 years. This was not bad leadership. This was not misjudging your media rights. This was a very focused, prudent, smart move by the Pac-12.
I'm going to do some on-air producing. Will you turn your volume up?
Volume's going up. Yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
You tell me.
Yeah, it's okay. You were just a little low.
A little low?
Yeah, a little low.
Am I better?
A little higher. A little higher. Yeah.
How about now?
Yeah, give it a little bit. Give it a little bit more, John. Come on, give it to me.
How about now?
There we go.
Are we all the way up?
Yeah,
I'm all the way up.
Okay, there you go.
That's as hot as it can get over here.
Well, you're hot. Yeah. You're hot. You're hot. You're hot now. You look hot. You sound hot, and your reporting is hot.
Thank you.
Here's the deal that when everybody was hand wringing, last week when everyone's writing the same thing. All the Pac-12, they misplayed their hand, and it's all falling apart. And they didn't do a good job at this realignment. And I remember just talking to a few people off the ledge. Some Krueger fans just saying, just wait a minute. What if they get Gonzaga and they bring them into the conference and then they figure out eventually another team for football? How does that sound to you? Okay. And then that's exactly what happened. To me, I'll figure out the 8th team, John. Having Gonzaga a part of this conference for basketball is a much bigger deal in brand than having UNLV in the conference.
Yes. And it's going to attract others, right? I mean, who else out there is restless right now? Who else out there is thinking about possibly joining the Pac-12? Because I think, that question needs to be asked. Gonzaga clearly restless in the WCC. no home for them in the Big 12. They didn't see what they liked there. But there's a regional feel to this thing too that makes me kind of wonder. Like, you don't go outside that Western footprint unless it's a no-brainer addition that adds some real value in football. And so keep an eye on what comes next.
What will come next? I mean, the teams out there don't really excite me. You've heard rumors of Texas State. You've heard rumors of Sacramento State. Where do they turn their attention to when it comes to football now?
Look, I tweeted out that, Grand Canyon is someone that they want to talk with. It's on their list. Let's talk to Grand Canyon University. They are, again, another basketball edition, but they don't bring anything in the football world. And I was told to pump the brakes a little bit on talking about that, like, it was on their wish list, so to speak. Might just be someone that they're interested in talking with at the right number. So that kind of tells me if they are talking with Grand Canyon, they're not far down the road with Grand Canyon. But they still need a football member, Puck. And so, the initial salvo that they made with those American schools, including Memphis, does Memphis and its great basketball pedigree want to be part of what's happening, this basketball renaissance that's happening in the western part of the United States? That would be a better addition. And then I think you have to start to ask yourself, are there members in the ACC or members in the Big 12 or members elsewhere that are just a little restless? Now, I think it's a little bit of a reach to say that, like, they would leave a Power 4 conference for the Pac-12. But if they could get the right combinations of schools to leave, could the Pac-12 then position itself as, hey, this should be a Power 5 again? That has to be part of the thinking if you're the Pac-12 conference. But I'm hearing lean. I'm hearing selective. I'm watching what they're doing. They're not just going to take anybody, Puck. It's going to be no-brainer additions, and they got one today.
Yeah, it's a great addition. I mean, it just really is. You start looking at that conference, and I just don't know how anyone can't be excited for what they added today. I mean, you add Gonzaga with the likes of San Diego State, who was, I mean, these are two teams who are in the Final Four. Was it well, a couple of years ago? They're both in the Final Four. Boise State's had a great basketball program with Leon Rice. Colorado State's always been very good at basketball. Washington State, obviously, in the last few years with Kyle Smith. Oregon State, has been relevant. It's a good conference. And, and you noted this before in the last visits with us about how TV executives are paying more attention to basketball.
Yes. And that basketball tournament, is due for a little bit of an expansion and a renegotiation of the TV contract. And so I think with a straight face, the Pac-12, like when you look at the KenPom rating of this conference as it stands with these members that have as far as the membership is today, it's got a higher KenPom rating than the ACC.
Yeah,
it has
crazy.
An average of 4.7 NCAA tournament bids in the last 3 years. So we're talking about a 4-bid, maybe a 5-bid league as it stands. I'm really expecting like Washington State and Oregon State, who started this thing. And here's another point, Puck. Everybody said the Pac-12 was dead. All these outsiders, people east of the Rockies who do not understand the brand of the Pac-12 in 108 years, that it was dead, it's abandoned, just accept relegation. Oregon State and Washington State said, hold a second. We think there's value in the brand. They have proven that by adding the top of the Mountain West, who obviously saw value in the brand, adding Gonzaga, who saw value in the brand. These schools aren't just running to a make-believe thing. They're running towards a brand. But I think with a straight face, you can say, look, this is a 4 or 5 bid conference in the NCAA tournament. Could they get bigger media rights negotiations as it pertains to the college football playoff? We shall see. Big Ten and SEC trying to run away with it, but clearly the brand matters here in the Pac-12. It's a no-brainer win for a conference that badly needed one. Yeah.
Is there anything with the conference? Is there anything looking ahead? What is, and if you said this already, I apologize, right? Sometimes I miss hearing things. The odds, did UNLV and like Memphis sign anything that completely 100% binds them to the AAC and then the Mountain West?
I heard the language I heard with UNLV and the language I saw was, sort of a letter of understanding. I did not see signed a contract that binds them. And of course the media rights deal is what binds any school. So I have to think UNLV is maybe doing some deep thinking here, because the Mountain West, I got to give Gloria Navarez credit. Like, she's doing everything she could possibly do to hold her conference together. She's trying to not be George Kliavkoff. I got to give her credit there. But adding UTEP as a member is not like adding Gonzaga, right? It's a real defensive maneuver to try to get to 8 members. It's not proactive. It's not forward thinking. And so I think, UNLV has got to be asking itself, has it made the right decision in staying in the Mountain West? And then further, my understanding of the offer that was made to Memphis and Tulane and others, like the Pac-12, presented terms to those schools. They very quickly then pivoted and said, we're in solidarity. They obviously didn't think that the terms were no-brainers, but the athletic director at Memphis has since come out and said, this wasn't a good deal, but we're listening. And so I don't think anything is done until it's done. We learned that in the last round of realignment. I also think Washington State and Oregon State have to be looking over at San Diego State, Gonzaga, and what they've added and going, oh, crap, we need to start investing in basketball, because I think you're going to need to see a ramp up. And if the donors and the boosters at Washington State and Oregon State aren't excited about, buying in on basketball, they should get there very quickly. I expect both of those schools to go, hey, we need to raise some funds and we need to start investing in basketball.
Let's move on to some of the before we move on to what happened in this past weekend of college football. What is a timeline, do you think, for another edition? Do you think it's going to be a while? They're going to let this thing play out, see what they can get in a media rights deal, or how long do you think this time frame is for them adding another team, another football only team?
Keep in mind, I was told last week, and I think we talked about it, there was a cascading order of offers that they were, they had parallel plans here that were, hey, we're going to go after Memphis and Tulane. They didn't get them. They pivoted back, said, okay, can we pick up UNLV? Didn't get them. The move then became, all right, let's bring Gonzaga into the fold. And, there were discussions that were ongoing. So I think they've already had conversations with whoever else that they are serious about targeting. They could go to market with their media rights and include some escalators in that deal. That's one thing that has been floated out there, and then you have some concrete numbers to show a Memphis, to show UNLV, to show someone else if you've got other targets that are out there. But Puck, they can't sit around. They've got 22 months to become an 8-member conference. They still need one school that's going to play all sports. Gonzaga doesn't fulfill that requirement. It's just a great addition. And so I think that they have to do this sooner rather than later, because it's not like they have 22 months to add the school, then go to market. No, they've got to get to market quickly. So either they go to market and they add the escalators in and they tell the TV companies, what will you pay for Memphis? What will you pay for UNLV? What will you pay for school X that's out there that is our pipe dream school? I am told that getting Cal or Stanford out of the ACC would require an implosion of that conference. They are tied into a grant of rights, but gosh, Cal seems like the more likely target to me if you're going to go after one of those, because, they are getting, a media rights distribution that is anemic compared to the rest of that conference. That's just a lifeboat for now for them. But I think the timeline, Puck, to answer your question, is sooner rather than later. I will not be surprised if we get news within the next week about that final piece, because, that if they can bring that piece into the fold, then go to market, they're in a stronger position of leverage with those TV companies. But they clearly have what they can, with a straight face right now, say is the 5th best conference in college athletics. And I think that was their objective. Now they need a football piece.
All right, let's go to the field. Let's go back to Friday, what happened in New Jersey, Rutgers, in Washington. What do you chalk this up to right now? Is Washington in trouble, or just the growing pains of a new system and a new head coach?
I think it's a little bit of both, but I think you have to be concerned if you're a Husky fan, because, you're joining a conference where you're now climbing over Michigan and Ohio State and Oregon and USC. And, that's a different rebuild, even if we're talking about a rebuild. It's not the same rebuild that existed in the Pac-12 when you were kind of trying to rebound out of the Tyrone Willingham situation and rebuild, right? Like, you only needed to get over USC and Oregon and maybe not Utah to get to the top. It's a steeper climb in the Big Ten Conference. And so I think there were concerns there. I also want to chalk a little bit of that up to, short week going east. We've seen teams from the Pacific time zone struggle with those games. Now, a week earlier, Stanford went and beat Syracuse under similar conditions. So let's not go too far with it. But I think it was a little bit of both things. Washington hasn't looked great. They've looked a little weak in spots. I think it's going to be a tough later part of the season. So if you're a Husky fan, you better hope that, in the next few weeks, Washington can find a win or two.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is a rough stretch for them. I mean, they don't. How much do you think the Michigan game is for them is a must win? To me, I think it's a huge must win for them.
It's a huge game. I don't want to say must win because I don't think anybody's expecting Washington to get to the playoff. But, you look later in the season, there just aren't any wins down the stretch for Washington. And Rutgers is better than they've been in recent years. Let's not go too far with it. But I am left kind of thinking about this season in Washington and thinking, I understand why Husky fans were down about Kalen DeBoer leaving for Alabama. You lost all momentum, and now you're trying to get it back amid an obstacle course that is going to punch you in the face every week.
Yeah, and then I think you watch what happens on Friday, right? A team that is undisciplined, makes a lot of penalties, makes a lot of stupid plays. You lose a game in which you should have beat that team. And then the next night you watch your former coach, for a half or 3/4 of a football game, just completely dismantle a Georgia football team. And I know Georgia came back, but again, Kalen DeBoer, and his record is just stupid what he's doing against these teams. But I think it's just if you're a Husky fan, it's just a hard pill to swallow to watch him go off on that national stage and have the game that he had.
Yeah, and Washington fans, Kalen DeBoer has won everywhere that he's went. Jed Fish, he's had success in rebuilding things. But if you're Washington, if you're thinking about the long view here, you already have to start thinking about what's coming after Jed Fish, win or lose, right? If he isn't able to get traction, you have to be in position for what's next. And if he is able to get traction, he's likely leaving and going somewhere else. So I think if you're a Washington fan, you already have to be thinking about Jed Fish as a stopgap, even before he's coached a game. And now you have, sort of a underwhelming start to your season. You lose the Apple Cup. You go to Rutgers and lose. You look at your schedule and you start to go, okay, is this a 4 or 5 win season? What is out there for Washington? But really not positive trajectory at all.
We got Oregon State, we got Oregon and Michigan State, right? Now, to be honest, have you talked to Beaver fans?
Yes.
Are they rooting for Oregon this week?
Yeah, they have mixed feelings. I don't think they're going to the stadium. I don't think they're going to put on green, but I think they are going to yell and shout at their TVs in the living room and be angry. And I think they're going to be pleasantly entertained if Oregon boat races Michigan State. Conversely, I think Oregon's a little worried about this game. It's a little bit of a trap. You got Ohio State coming on October 12th. All the focus on that game. Short week. They did not practice Sunday because they got back at 2:00 in the morning. By the way, Washington got back at 4:00 in the morning, landed at 3:48 a.m., returning from Rutgers. This is part of the deal now. And Oregon left late because they had to kick off at 8:00, and they finished that game against UCLA. They don't depart the Burbank Airport till 2 a.m. They land at 3 something. And so here comes Michigan State on a short week. You didn't practice Sunday. You're not going to really practice on Thursday because you have a Friday game. It's a walkthrough. And so you're on 3 days of practice against Jonathan Smith, who kind of has Dan Lanning's number 2 years ago. At least he beat him with a team that wasn't as good. And so I don't think Michigan State can win this game, but I think it's a little bit of a trap, and wouldn't be surprised maybe if Oregon doesn't play their best game. But that's not what Beaver fans want to hear. To answer your question, Beaver fans want justice. They would like to see Jonathan Smith and Michigan State lose badly.
Yeah, but I mean, it's got to be a trap. I mean, it's clearly a trap game for, we talked about the trap game, with Washington State, when they were facing San Jose State, after the Apple Cup. It's a trap game for them because they've got Ohio State on the horizon.
Yeah, a lot of emotion, and just a lot of emotion. And you'll love this. I mean, I talked to Jonathan Smith in Indianapolis. I think he kind of put it to rest. He was looking for any port in the storm. He had, his agents telling him, get to the Big Ten. This is an offer. I think if he had been more patient, he probably ends up at Washington or UCLA. Let's be real.
Sure.
But the goodwill thing, he always dropped his gear at goodwill. He tried to explain it all away, but there's just bad feelings. There's just bad feelings there. And I invited him on my show this week. I don't think he's going to come on saying it's a short week. They got a tight schedule. I got to wash my hair, all that stuff. But I think, in the end, it's just, Oregon may put this thing to rest for Oregon State fans in some weird bit of poetic justice.
Yeah. Speaking of Washington State, they go into Boise State, and John, I got choked up thinking about the game. It was a hell of a football game. It was a hell of an environment. It was great to see. I think it's got a chance to be a real great budding rivalry. I think between those two. I love the name for it, the Snake River Shootout. It's great. All the images that went along with it, and Boise State strikes first, and they handled them. At times. It was a game in the second half and a play here, a play there. They had no answer for Ashton Genty. That is without a doubt the best running back in the country. And the Cougs, they just nothing. They couldn't tackle him. They couldn't do anything against him.
He's jumping over people. He is outrunning people, diving at the goal line with two guys hanging on his back. He looked like Barry Sanders. That's who he reminds me of when you see him run. He's got some Barry Sanders in his game, and he is not – one guy's not tackling him. They bounce off him. He runs through tackles. You can't arm tackle that guy. I think he's a Heisman candidate. He's not going to get a lot of love nationally. People are going to kind of politely include him. But if I had to put my ballot out today, is there anybody who's been a more impactful player in the country than Ashton Genty's been? I think he right now would be at the top of my Heisman ballot, along with Travis Hunter at Colorado. Apologies to the East Coast voters, but I think those two players have done more for their teams. But Boise State's got to get to the playoff for him to be, end up at the downtown athletic club. And they look physically at the line of scrimmage like a playoff team. They could not just make it there, Puck, but I kind of wonder, would they be a 12 seed, or could they arrive the way they played Oregon? Could they arrive as an 11 or a 10? Could they win a game? Like Boise State, the way they're playing starts to make you think about that. They still have to go to UNLV and win, but it's that kind of season, I think, for Boise State. And, the Pac-12's got to be looking back saying, hey, this might be the best story that the conference has going. It's got a team that looks like a playoff team.
What did you make of College Game Day's decision to go to Cal?
I think they knew if they were ever going to go to Berkeley, it was going to be now. And I think all the people in Berkeley with their hula hoops and their bubbles and their patchouli oil are all excited to come out at 6:00 in the morning. I cannot wait to see how Berkeley shows up for College Game Day.
Can they get some hobos out there and stuff?
Is Pat McAfee going to smoke marijuana on College Game Day? I don't know. We're going to find out.
You know where they should do Game Day? They should do it from Tightwad Hill.
Tightwad Hill. Yeah.
They should. Have you ever been up there?
I have not been up there, but I have looked.
It's amazing.
You've done it?
I took my kid there. We went when the Cougs played Cal. I don't know, it was like 4 years ago. I'm like, well, I've got to see this. I've read about it.
Lee Corso up to Tightwad Hill, and they'll do kind of a remote, like, Lee, what's the scene up there?
It's awesome. Jim. John. They've got Barb. Well, Jim. I got Jim on my mind, and now I got John. John.
Obsessed with it.
Yeah. There's guys up there with like lazy boy chairs, a TV. There's a barbecue up there. It's amazing, and it's a great view too.
And look, Mario Cristobal has struggled in Berkeley. You look historically, he went there with an Oregon team that was really good and lost. Like, Cal has given Mario Cristobal problems. You know why? Justin Wilcox. Yeah. He's a really good game coach. He adjusts well, and he sort of does the things that Mario Cristobal doesn't do on the other side of the ball. The way that Cristobal coaches very conservatively, wants to beat you like 24-13, that kind of game, isn't there to try to put 40 or 50 on you. The chokehold that he's had his teams in historically, a little bit of that has come off this season, but it plays to Justin Wilcox's strength. Like, he can win that kind of game. Cal can be in that kind of game. Now, I'm not saying Cal's going to win, they're going to upset, but it's just explains why Justin Wilcox has given Mario Cristobal problems. He is a really good coach.
Yeah, it's and it has experience obviously the last couple of years with Cam Ward. I went back and looked at it. Cam has had 2 really good games against him. Has had some turnovers, but has had good games against him. And Cam Ward has just been fabulous this year for Miami. It's
Yes.
like I did not think he would be like this. I really didn't. I thought they haven't really played many. They haven't played much competition yet, and I thought Cristobal would neuter him. But so far, so good. I mean, he has
They
been
look better.
unbelievable.
He looks better. Give it some time. Let's let him see. We're still figuring out who's good, aren't we? I mean, we're still figuring out who's good, who's not good. I think Oregon's better than we thought maybe a couple weeks ago because their wins over Idaho and Boise State now look a lot better, right? And Oregon State plays Purdue very well. Purdue is in a 0-0 game with Nebraska at halftime. Now I'm going, well, maybe Oregon State's a little better than we thought they were. Could they win 9 or 10? And so, I think we're still figuring all of this out, but I think Game Day knew, Puck, if they were ever going to Berkeley, this was it. There wasn't another high-profile game that was clearly better. And you've got a Cal team that, even though it lost to Florida State, kind of embarrassing, but even though it lost to Florida State, could hold its head high. And then Cristobal going in there, it's a good storyline. Like, he just, for whatever reason, and I think it's Wilcox, I think Cristobal's had problems with Cal.
Yeah. Real quick, just a note for you. CW, which I think has been okay what I've watched, but they need to get rid of Michael Mothershed. That needs to end now. They need to find a better official that can actually talk.
Yeah.
And makes sense on the broadcast.
There are some production things that you see them working out. You can see it. It looks like, they are just starting to do football. And there's little things that pop up when they bring in their official or even just some of the graphics.
That's fine. They just find a better person that they can go to the rules to get like an update on the rules. I mean, I've watched him like 4 different times now, and like every time he's like, "Oh, that's gonna be clearly a fumble." And then like right when he's saying that, no, it's not a fumble. He's never right about anything.
I don't think they necessarily should go to that shot.
Yeah.
I think the Big Ten does a really good job with this, Puck. Like, they show their command center, right? They go there, they show the command center. It looks very official. The whole design of that let's check with our expert is to try to reinforce the confidence that you have in the officiating itself. Mothershed's not doing that. He's doing the opposite of that. It's like going to somebody's dad in the living room who has a general idea of what is happening with the football game and kind of knows the rules, but it's been no more accurate than you or I in the press box going, what do you think?
He's just not good. He's not built for the TV. All right. John Canzano's weekly visit brought to you by Zeke's Pizza, best selection of pizzas and local Northwest craft beers. Visit Zeke'sPizza.com. Follow John on Twitter, John Canzano BFT. Read all of his work, JohnCanzano.com. The radio show, The Bald Faced Truth, down in Portland at 7:50 The Game. In case you missed it, we'll be up on YouTube. You can listen later, Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast, of course, up at PuckSports.com. John, you're the best. We'll wrap next week. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Jim.
Oh, you son of a gun. I knew he was going to. I knew he was going to work that in there. All right. John Canzano with us every week, you son of a gun. It was smart move on your part to do that to me there. At the end. Appreciate John jumping on, giving you the very latest what's happening there in college football. Go read all of his work up at johncanzano.com to get the very latest on the addition of Gonzaga to the Pac-12. All right, let's wrap up and talk a little baseball. Bill Krueger, who has been so kind all year long to join us to talk baseball, is back with us. Bill Krueger. It's brought to you by Rise Above Foundation. Visit nativeyoutthriseabove.org. And it's our final visit of the year, Bill Krueger. But don't worry, just like that, we'll be back into spring training. How are you, sir? Are you a little sad today?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's always tough to put the season away. We get invested. We it's like, for me, it's the rhythm of my life. I mean, I've been living this rhythm, quite honestly, since I signed my first pro contract in 1980. So that's a long time to be in this sort of baseball rhythm. So, of course, lots of seasons that didn't end up in the playoffs in my career. But I mean, they've tasted it here in Seattle. And now it's hard to accept.
Biggest reason they're home this postseason.
Well, obviously they had a big tailspin right before they added Dan and Edgar. That road trip where they went 1-9, I think. That was a big that penalized them. That really took the wind out of their sails. But if you step away from it, clearly there's some offensive woes that are pretty dramatic. Their inability to put the ball in play, their inability to score at a high enough level that they ended up 10th in the AL in runs. They made a little bit of a run toward the end of the year offensively, but when you're number one in pitching, number one in quality starts, and you can't get to the playoffs. Normally, teams that finish in the top 6 in ERA are almost shoo-ins to make the playoffs, and they were number 1. So that tells you something right there. We could talk about some of the mitigating factors, how this team was put together, some of the things they had to do to adjust payroll at the beginning, how they kind of cobbled it together after January 1st. And then their inability, I think, as I step away and look at this thing, when you look at the teams, like they did very well against Houston, right? And then you say to yourself, well, Houston's won the division. How come that's not good enough? Well, we had a losing record against the Angels. We had a losing record against Detroit, Kansas City, all the teams that we went nose to nose with. And what I notice about those teams is, and this is a big generalization, they have a lot of left-hand hitting. And what did we do to start the year? We kicked both of our starting pitchers out. Now you could say, well, Marco Gonzalez had an injury-plagued year, and Robbie Ray couldn't pitch till the deadline. And then even at the deadline, when they saw they had real issues with left-hand hitting, especially as you match up the last 3 or 4 innings of the game, they did not address left-handed pitching. And I think that is the subtle reason that they weren't able to just crawl over some of those clubs and make it to the playoffs.
Yeah. And just in terms of, I want to get into some comments that were made yesterday, at least that came out yesterday. Changes in the offseason that you would like to see. What would you like to see them do? I don't know if you have got a specific player or what, but what is it that you need to see them try to fix here in this offseason? So
well, I mean, I think
they're not in this situation again.
Well, I think they have to, and I think they are going to address this because they seem so like it's all of a sudden, the skies have parted. Now the vision is clear that the idea of punching out and walking and hitting homers and playing in our ballpark, it's not a good fit. Like they didn't know that. That was like, we couldn't figure that out. We just figured it out right when Dan and Edgar joined the leadership part of this thing. Now it's like, oh, wow, it's so clear. Put the ball in play is a good idea, and not striking out as much is a good idea. Playing with an edge to win, it's a good idea. I don't know. How does that become sort of a slap against the forehead? I don't know. I mean, you could say you don't have the right players, and you could say to a degree you're right, but then players should be like having some ownership of what it takes to win, which they seem to find the last 5 weeks of the season, but couldn't find it up to then outside of their pitching staff, which, if this pitching staff pitches a generation back, they might still make the playoffs because maybe that pitching staff, instead of averaging 5 2/3 a start, they're averaging 7 1/3 a start. And that inning and a third that the good pitchers pitch might have been enough just to take you right over the top. But we don't play in that day and age anymore. You lean hard on the bullpen. So I think those are things they recognize. You could say, well, our park is hard, and our park is cold, and our park doesn't carry, and it's a marine air, and now I've heard that the alleys are slow, and so we can't get doubles. That's why we don't have doubles, because our alleys are slow. For Rodriguez not to have 20 doubles is a crime, or not lead the team. He might have had 20. Our doubles are a joke. I can tell you right now, doubles to me are the secret weapon, because you know what the double gives you, Jason? The rally never ends. The rally never ends. It's still slugging. So all you happy little slugging monsters are happy because you're getting your slugging, but you need to hit some doubles. Rodriguez he barely had 20 doubles. He didn't hit a triple. What's the deal? I mean, that's almost hard to even fathom. But I think they obviously have some holes in their offense they need to address. And they're going to have to do that, hopefully without stealing from Rob and Peter to pay Paul by taking young pitching and trading it away to get hitting. That would be unfortunate.
Well, it doesn't seem like they're going to do that. I mean, I think Jerry Dipoto in his impromptu press conference, which he arranged 20 minutes before he told anybody, said that they're not going to trade any of those guys.
Well, I don't know where the fits are. I mean, to me, you need an outfielder. You can think about first base. You have to do second. You got to do third. Yeah, backup catcher. Need a left-handed reliever that's got some pop. Needed probably another power arm in the bullpen. Brash is coming back, but you probably need a little more help there. DH, I don't know. You're going to sign up Justin Turner at 40. I mean, he was the only pro hitter we had. So it's kind of hard to say, well, geez, that guy was pretty good. And what did he make? 13? Are we going to pay him? Are we going to pay him 13? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, those are things that I can't wrestle with. So if you're not going to trade the pitching, then you have to go to the market, right? You're going to have to trade young people, or you're going to have to go to the market and pay.
Right.
Or you could have the delusion that they're a great offensive team based on the past 5 weeks. I would say that's a little bit delusional. I mean, I think there's some good elements there, but to think that you've now sorted it out, like I said, the slap across the forehead, oh, that's right. Putting the ball in play is a good idea. Not striking out 14 times a game is a good idea. Playing with an edge is a good idea. Trying to play to win is a good idea. Yeah. Duh.
But I think that's the worry. I think that's the worry, though, Bill, is I think that they look at what they did in the last 5 weeks, 6 weeks of the season, and they think that they're okay. I think they believe that, because you got the owner of the team coming out and saying in an interview with the Seattle Times about, quote, we've got the resources to be able to do things we need to do to put a good team on the field. We've never been focused on free agent bats. Those kind of big dollar free agent bats as a matter of strategy, not because of anything to do with resources. So he's saying John Stanton, and this is what he told Ryan Divish and Adam June. This is back in June, by the way. But they published it yesterday. He's saying that no. It's not because we don't have the money or we don't want to pay. Is that our strategy is not to pay good players. That's what he's saying. So how do you compete if you have an owner of the team saying we just don't think that it's a wise decision and a wise strategy to go out and buy players during free agency? And if they're not going to increase their payroll, and then they got the president of the team saying, we're not going to trade any young pitchers, how are you going to improve this baseball team? You just rattled off what they need to do. And I laughed when I heard Dipoto say, well, we're really close. We just have to upgrade a little bit. Up a little bit. Third base, second base, first base, DH. That's half your team. What are you talking about?
And unless Riley's going to play every day, you need an outfielder.
Well,
with a Rosarina probably not signing up. Robles is such a nice find for them, but he said a Rosarina at the right price.
Yeah,
he says a Rosarina they're going to sign a Rosarina.
Well, he said that he said
and sign him.
Yeah, he said their outfield is set.
Oh, no.
I mean,
going to sign a Rosarina. To me, Robles and a Rosarina are kind of the same guy, except I like Robles better. Yeah. I'd rather go to the market and find somebody else. Here's the thing. You dumped 3 players at the start of last year, and let's just say you wanted to trade those players. Okay, let's just say that's the premise. But you don't go to the market and say, "Uncle." You go to the market and sort of say, "Well, let's do a little horse trading. Let's figure it out. Let's not give them away." Okay. And then when you get to the second half, after you decide what you need to do to shore the team up, but you're not in the market for Juan Soto or that kind of player, you got to do better. You got to do your homework. Polanco, sorry. Mitch Garver, sorry. Haniger was part of the deal, so we can't really talk about him.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you have to be smarter. The Solanos and the Jerks and Profires that San Diego found, those are pretty nice players. They don't hit homers. Well, Profile hits some homers. But I mean, I think what you have to do is realize some things. That maybe hitting the ball in the alley, hitting doubles and putting the ball in play, and we need a little bit more of that element on the team, may not be as expensive, because baseball's still not quite waking up to the idea that you can win that way. And we don't know if Milwaukee can somehow win it, or, one of these teams that does put the ball in play, the Guardians, can they win it? And then everybody goes, wow, we can win without hitting homers. We can pitch and catch and hit doubles and run. Well, maybe they should start thinking about doing that. Maybe they need to take that mower that they use and bring the mower setting down a little bit and tighten the outfield up. You want the ball to go in the alley? Tighten the mower up.
Are we blaming the
That's what you do.
groundskeepers?
And oh, by the way, another thing you can do is not feeling like you're in prison. Like when we left the Kingdom, we said, oh my God, we're escaping. We're free. We're free. And then you know what that meant? No matter what the weather is, it can be like, ice is howling, but boy, we get that roof open. I'll tell you what, you want offense to get better, shut the roof till June. You want the players to be happy and hit better, shut it all the whole time. You want offense to be better, shut the roof. I'm serious. You want offense to be better, you want your park to play better, shut the roof.
Wow.
All the time. Now, of course, they're not going to do that, because you know what the roof does? Takes out the nasty shadows, takes out the wind, ball carries a little bit better, hitters feel a little bit better. It's kind of an equalizer. I mean, if you want things to be better, then that's what you do. I don't know. I mean, I think you can be shrewd. I think you have to get your head out of the sheets of paper, the reams of paper that are giving you the numbers that somehow told you that Mitch Garver was going to be your DH, that somehow said that Jorge Polanco was going to be your everyday second baseman, and look up and send somebody out that watches these guys carefully and comes back with a report that's based upon someone that can understand where a player is, a real scout.
Yeah, I mean, I just go back and listen to those comments yesterday and then listen to what Dipoto said on the weekend, and I just don't. I don't feel any better about where the team is headed. I just don't. And I've got a problem. I've got a problem with an organization, Bill, that is gonna have an informal press conference in a dugout with a selected few people there. It's not. They still have not acknowledged whether or not Dipoto is coming back. By the way, they didn't even acknowledge it. Now, I mean, they basically are by putting him out there to talk, but they haven't even acknowledged that. He didn't even acknowledge it himself when he talked to people. This is a public trust. Is what the team is, right? And I think when you're a public trust and you are and the public paid for that stadium, I think you owe it to people to sit there and ask and answer questions. And as you're the owner of the team, like John Stanton is, you owe it to your fans to sit there and take all the questions and then have them ask you and have the media ask you, why is he coming back for a 10th season? Why do you think you're moving in the right direction? I mean, Jerry Reinsdorf is getting killed in Chicago. At least Jerry Reinsdorf wrote a letter to his fans to say, sorry, we screwed up. It was unacceptable what we did this year. I haven't seen anything from this group at all. And I think it feeds into the narrative and the perception that they really aren't all that concerned about winning. To a degree they are, so they can stay relevant and profitable and not go all in on a championship. And when I read a comment that says, yeah, our strategy is not to go after big free agents, and then they list Juan Soto in there because he's not aging, he's young. You should be all over Juan Soto. But, of course, they won't be because they don't want to dip their toes in there. Why would you not want to be in the Juan Soto sweepstakes if you're the Seattle Mariners?
Well, it's hard to say what the cost of doing business is going to be, and it's hard to say what that number looks like after he plays a great year for you, and it's hard to say whether or not he has the appetite to join your team. There's a lot of stuff that you don't know. I mean, I kind of give him a little bit of a hall pass on that. I just think you have to think a little bit differently. The whole point is that you have, and I've talked about this, a team that's in a very good position. They're still in a very good position next year. What do you have? You've got 5 premium starters, all under control, 4 of them very young. Two of them even got better this year. You got a young closer, granted a little banged up at the end, but controllable. You have a guy that's sort of his two-headed monster that should come back and be a nice compliment, right? You got the shortstop. The shortstop is a good player. Got banged up this year. Didn't have nearly the year he had the year before.
Sure.
I think it is fool's gold for him to try to swing the bat for homers. He needs to flatten his bat out, and he needs to spray the baseball. He needs to hit for an average, use his batting eye, and be more effective offensively. You got the center fielder that kind of figured it out the last 5 weeks. Did the hit whisperer help him? I don't know. But his inability to carry a big part of this team hurt them. He's got to get better. He's got to figure out, how do I get better? How do I get a better ball to hit? How do I make better pitch judgments? That's what he has to get better. The catcher was tremendous, right? But what you have is you've got those places all filled in. You've got it. So they're right. They're close. They can go to the market and get a left-handed guy in the bullpen. They should be able to go to the market and get a high on base guy that's got some hitting acumen in some of those places that they have holes. They should be able to do that and not actually go out and get a superstar, Jason. But they have to be realistic. They can't just say, oh, we were good the last 5 weeks. No, they need to answer. They need to answer the things that I'm just talking about, right? Not that I'm the one that they have to answer to, but I think those are things that they have to get real with. And, maybe they're not quite ready to say, we're not sure if Josh Rojas is our guy, or Randy Rosarina is our guy, or Justin Turner's coming back, or Rayleigh's our everyday first baseman. Maybe they're not ready to say all those things. Or Garver's going to play once every 10 days. I don't know. I mean, I don't know, but I think they're close. I mean, they're so close this year, right? The unfortunate thing is it was so tantalizing because Houston basically wet the bed for half the season, all banged up, didn't do anything, and we let them come back. And they would let teams that had no winning acumen pass us. Kansas City, Detroit, come on. Those teams, they didn't think they could win, and all of a sudden they're like, holy cow, I guess we're going to be in the playoffs, right? Losing to the Angels, losing record. The Angels are lost, and you couldn't beat them. Yeah. So, there's a lot of things they need to shore up. They still have it in place. Now it won't be forever. Eventually, guys are going to get more expensive, and you're going to have to choose. You're going to have to pick and choose, but they have that group coming back. So I don't think they need Juan Soto to win. I don't. It'd be nice to have them for sure, but I think there's a way.
Oh.
But they need to address it.
We'll see, because I mean the only thing they're gonna do when he talks about addressing and increasing their payroll this year is just increasing the guys that they have. It's not talking about going out and getting anybody new, because all those guys are gonna come up there in arbitration. All right. We will. Thank you for doing this all baseball season. I think our audience loved it. You were great this year. You're great as always. We've moved you around a bunch. We've done different things. We're doing a new platform, and all of it's been brand new, and you were great at it. And I hope to do it again next year. I hope we'll catch up during the off season. I know there'll be plenty to talk about, but I just want to thank you.
That'd be great. Love doing it with Jason. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just want to thank you. Just thank you for doing it. Appreciate it very much.
I had a great time, Jason. Good. Love being on with you, and I hope continued success with the podcast.
You're the best. There he is, Bill Krueger, Root Sports. He joined us throughout the baseball season, getting caught up on the very latest, of course, of the fabulous Root Sports. And Bill, brought to you by his organization, riseabove.org. And in case you missed any of that, go to YouTube, listen to it, Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast, and of course up at PuckSports.com. Bill Krueger throughout the baseball season. And we'll catch up with Bill. Trust me, during the offseason, we'll get a few updates there from Bill as they make some moves. I mean, we'll see what they can do. But if they are going to be adamant that that's their rope, that's their outfield, they're not going to do anything with Randy Rosarina, okay, fine. I still do believe that they will do something, or can't have the possibility to do something. I'm not going to just completely take Jerry Dipoto at his word, what he said in the dugout. In terms of the young pitchers, I hope he doesn't trade any of those guys. I think Castillo, like many people believe, that Castillo very much will be on the market, and see if they can move him. But when you've got the owner of the team coming out and saying that it's our strategy not to get good players, because that's what he said. It's not because we don't have the money. It's just because we just don't want to do it. that's as damaging as a quote. That to me, I'll be honest with you. That quote that John Stanton gave to Adam June and Ryan Divish back in June, which they published yesterday, go read it, seattletimes.com, to me is more damaging than the 54% from DePoto. Because that's the strategy. We don't want to get good players because you don't like to get free agents. Why? Why would that be your strategy? Because you were concerned with Robinson Cano. By the way, Robinson Cano worked out for you. He did. He wasn't a failure at all. The rest of the team was a failure because you didn't do enough around him. But Robinson Cano's tenure here was not a failure at all. And you've gotten so, I don't know, blinded by people telling you that it was, but it was not a failure with signing Robinson Cano. So this is, I thought last offseason was going to be just a massive offseason for this team, but this will be another one. See what they can do. But I just think John Stanton coming out and saying what he said yesterday, to me, is worse than 54%. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I read too much into it, but I think it's way worse. Because he just told you, yes, our payroll is going to go up. It's only going up. It's only going up because of arbitration. That's why it's going to go up. And he's going to take a victory lap for it going up. But this is his own guy. See, and he told you in that same article, we're not going to go out and sign. I mean, Jude and Divish alluded to it. They're not going to go out and sign anybody big. They're going to do it. And they got holes everywhere. He acts like, oh, we're just a few players away. No, they're not. First base, second base, third base, and designated hitter. / backup catcher. They're not a few players away. Massive holes on this baseball team. Massive. All right. Hey, what the puck? It's brought to you by Restoration One of North Seattle. Your restoration company lets you avoid the stress of water, fire, and mold damage with their property restoration services, locally owned and operated. Make them your first call when damages affect your residential or commercial property. 206-817-8917. Visit them online at restoration1.com, the North Seattle franchise. The passing of Pete Rose yesterday, I mean, this is the Mount Rushmore topic that you save for the summer when you have nothing to talk about, whether or not Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame. And I think I'm not really old. I was not old enough to watch Pete Rose play. Certainly seen the highlights of him. You read a lot about him. If you love baseball, you know everything about Pete Rose, and you listen to people that watched him play. I thought Jason Stark wrote just a fantastic column about Pete Rose today up at the Athletic. Go read if you haven't done so yet. At this point, we in this debate of whether or not to put him in the Hall of Fame or not. And, I think when it comes to all these guys that have issues off the field, and this debate of whether or not to put him in the Hall of Fame. And I wouldn't necessarily lump Pete Rose in with Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens. And I think for this reason. One, I think that they did something, Clemens and Bonds, that was against the goodwill of sport, is kind of the best way I can phrase it. They cheated the sport. They did. And they were Hall of Famers before, but they cheated the sport. And I know people are going to say, well, everybody was doing it, but they did. They cheated the sport when they didn't have to. I don't think Pete Rose cheated the sport. I think Pete Rose, was he guilty of being ignorant? Was he guilty of being flawed? Yes, he was. But I don't think he robbed the game as a sport. I don't think he disrespected the sport when he played. And I think for Major League Baseball, I don't think you turn your back on a great player. I mean, that the credentials, speak for themselves, right? Was he flawed? Of course he was flawed. We are all as flawed. Doesn't matter who we are. That doesn't diminish, the player that Pete Rose was. 4,256 hits, 17 All-Star games, 3 World Series championships, a career .303 hitter. He had on-base percentage of .375. He's the all-time leader in at-bats, plate appearances. I mean, that just goes on and on and on. He's 14th all-time in walks. And if you go watch old highlights of him, every time he'd walk, He'd run to first base. There was no jogging. There was no walking. He ran. Nearly stole nearly 200 bases. Played 5 different positions. 3 batting titles. We all should acknowledge our flaws, and his flaws, a lot like our own flaws, were self-inflicted, with gambling. The fact that he didn't own up to it right away, and if he did, probably he's in the Hall of Fame before he passes away. He did himself no favors how he acted in his post-baseball life, but he epitomized, I think, what it meant to be a baseball player, what it meant to be a ball player. Like when you hear guys, baseball players say, oh, he's just a ball player. That's what Pete Rose was. He was tough. He was aggressive. He was hard. He hustled. Charlie hustled. He played every game and every, I think, play like it was his last. I don't think you would reject what he did off the field. It's part of his tarnished legacy. And everyone, there's a lot of people in the Hall of Fame with a tarnished legacy, by the way. But I think you celebrate and acknowledge what he did on the field. He was baseball. And baseball is beautiful and flawed. So probably time to put him in the Hall of Fame. All right, that's it for Hey, What the Puck, brought to you by Restoration One of North Seattle. They are your restoration company that lets you avoid the stress of water, fire, and mold damage with their property restoration services. Locally owned and operated. Make them your first call when damages affect your residential or commercial property. 206-817-8917. Visit them online at restoration1.com. The North Seattle franchise. All right, that's it for us here today on a Tuesday. Coming up tomorrow, we'll talk a little NFL. Danny Kelly will join us from The Ringer. Also, Ryan Divish. We will wrap up the baseball season with Divish. We'll not wrap up really our visits with Divish, but we're going to wrap up the baseball season with Divish. We'll carve out some extra time tomorrow for Ryan to cover it all. Also, because Rob Staton wasn't on today, Rob's going to join Jim and I tomorrow live right at the top of the show, get his thoughts there on the Seahawks and how he thought how that game went there against Detroit. All right? That's what we got. Oh, coming out tomorrow, too, we've got Cougs Corner, and we'll talk to Jake Dickert one more time, get his thoughts on the Boise State game. Also, the Cougar podcast, The Old Crimson, coming out tomorrow as well. All right, we'll talk to you tomorrow. As always, we promise to be better.
No shirt, no shoes, no ties.
Would anybody like to smoke some pot?
Yeah.
I was born to love you. I was born to lick your face. I was born to rub you. But you were born to rub me first.
What do you need my address for?
We'd like to send out a mailer.
Mother of mercy, I don't speak